Welcome to today's episode of On the Rocks. Today we have two special guests with us, Libby Sharman and Samuel Robb. Libby is an exploration geologist currently working as the technical lead for BHP Xplor, having spent 5 years prior with BHP Metals Exploration, contributing to global exploration strategy through project generation and prospectivity analysis. She completed her PhD at McGill University, and prior to joining BHP, she gained experience in different facets of the exploration and mining industry, including as a project geologist, researcher, and communications specialist. Libby has experience on varied deposit types across 5 continents, from project generation to resource drilling for companies of all sizes and scopes. Libby's personal experiences have fostered an interest in improving the mining industry and making it a more inclusive and appealing sector in which to work. She pursues this through various volunteer roles in industry organizations, including the Society of Economic Geologists. Sam is the vice president of Bronzite Exploration, an early stage exploration company focused on taking original exploration concepts to market. He's an experienced exploration geologist, having worked on porphyry, epithermal, magmatic sulfide, and iron deposits, and has experience developing and running exploration programs in extremely remote areas of Canada. He holds a bachelor's degree in geophysics from the University of Toronto and a master's in geology from Carleton University, and he's registered as a professional geoscientist. With that, pour a drink and let's dive in. So, Sam and Libby, thank you so much for joining us on the Rocks. Really excited to have you both here today. Where are you calling in from?
Hi, Emily. It's great to be here. I'm phoning in from my home office here in the UK.
Yeah, and thanks for having me. I'm calling from Toronto.
Awesome. Well, I'm in Beaver Creek, Colorado today, out at the Precious Metals Conference. So excited to be chatting with the two of you about a really exciting topic, which is mineral systems and how you all are using them within the BHP Xplor program. So, Libby, I wanted to kind of kick it off for a lot of our listeners who are not familiar with the mining industry, perhaps, or they're new to it, they're new to geology. Could you give us like a little 101 class on mineral systems and what that means and why is it important?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's a pretty broad topic, and we could be here all day, but I'll try to keep it high level. And Sam has heard this quite a few times before, but mineral systems is something that has been around now in the mineral exploration and economic geology industry and community for probably a decade or so. And it's really this idea that rather than talking about deposits and ore forming processes in a descriptive model structure, so using, typically what we would do is say this has this geological feature, and this geological feature, therefore it is a nickel sulfide deposit, for instance. We actually look at the key geological processes that are happening that lead to the formation of these ore deposits and these ore systems. Why this is really interesting is it gets you away from pigeonholing your projects or your opportunities into a particular thing, and you get away from being driven by observational data, and you think about what's actually happening and what has to happen well for you to form a world-class ore deposit. Within BHP, we've taken this concept and we use it as a foundation to how we drive our exploration programs, how we think about prospectivity in areas. And we've identified some key processes that are common to all ore deposit systems. We call this the golden thread. It gets put together in a presentation looking a bit like a Trivial Pursuit disc with the different pies. And something I like to say is you have to get all the pies before you can go for the prize in the middle. And it really is that you need all of these processes to work correctly for you to get your deposit. And you also need them to have happened in a certain order. And the order in which they happen and those interdependencies can be different for every different deposit. Or every different mineral system. So you may have a series of different sedimentary hosted deposits, but the processes that happened and how they were put together and how they happened in geological time will be different, and you will get a different result. So we really take that as the first step. And then from there, for a given mineral system, we say, okay, what are the actual constituent processes? So say for nickel, you want to generate a magma and concentrate nickel into it. So do you do that through the melting of the mantle via large igneous province creation, so plumes? That's an example. And then we say, okay, if we think that's happened, what would we see in the geology and our geological data, like geophysics, geochemistry, that would tell us that it's happened? So for nickel, something like, have you got a mafic to ultramafic magma? And that's represented in the rocks that you're seeing. And from there, we use it to then step up and work out, okay, what are our critical programs? So we've got an area, we think it's good for nickel. We want to test if those mafic, ultramafic rocks are there. So what do we actually have to do? And then it's like, okay, is this a field program? Is it geophysics? Is it sampling and doing detailed lithogeochemistry? And we use that all to stack up how we're thinking about everything, but pulling it all back to that mineral system process-driven approach at the beginning.
And how is that different than, Libby, from like other ways that people approach the same problem? Because not everybody uses this approach, right?
No, not everybody uses it, and even companies that are using mineral systems use it in different ways. This is how we find it works within BHP Exploration. The sort of traditional way of doing things could almost be seen as a bit of a checkbox exercise in the worst case. You know, you say, okay, I'm looking at a porphyry copper deposit. So I am going to do these 3 types of geophysics. I'm going to do detrital zircon geochemistry, and I'm going to do green rocks, which is analyzing the geochemistry of things like chlorite and epidote. Mm-hmm. And that will tell me if I've got a porphyry deposit. And what it'll tell you is certain pieces of geological information, but it won't actually, none of those things are asking the why. Like, why are you doing green rocks? What are you actually trying to prove? And so it's just an evolution of taking that checklist toolkit approach that drives traditional exploration and thinking about it in a different way.
And Sam, what's your experience with this approach or model? Had you used this before working with Xplor, or was it new to you?
To a certain degree, it was new to me. I think one of the powerful things about the mineral systems, the way BHP uses it, is it provides, or it forces you to create a framework of how you're going to do your exploration program based on what you think might be there. And you can create a hypothesis with it that's testable from the deposit scale to the regional scale. So it lets you either go from a big scale and zone in and try and find a single deposit, or if you just have a showing, you can take that showing, create a hypothesis based on how it formed, fill out the mineral systems, and then try and test that against the regional belt. So it allows you to go in any direction, whether it's trying to find a single ore deposit or trying to find a belt of ore deposits. And I mean, I think in the junior industry, a lot of times people get stuck on looking at a single deposit type. They have one project and that's just what they're going to focus on. Libby said it very well. You know, they have a checkbox of exploration tools and criteria that they want to do because that's what everybody does, but they don't really think about what they're trying to answer with that. And you could miss out on things by not thinking about what geological processes are happening in this area. What makes it interesting? Why, if we have a showing there, why is that there? And could there be other ones far field away, or is this a unique one? Does it only exist here through some magical process of the earth? So we've used it, I think, quite successfully because for us, we built a hypothesis and we were able to go in the field and test that at the deposit scale or the prospect scale, as well as the regional scale, going out, you know, hundreds of kilometers and seeing if these processes are happening where we expect them to. And then if they're not happening and you see something on the contrary when you're in the field, well, then you can go back and revisit it and say, okay, where did we go wrong in our thinking or what wasn't right, and adjust a future exploration program to address those issues. So it allows you to keep exploring into the future. And if you don't find what you were looking for necessarily at first, well, that doesn't mean that the region isn't prospective anymore. There's nothing left to explore. It gives you the tools and the backing to generate projects and to frame exploration programs.
And I wonder, I know we've talked a little bit about this before, that Libby, one of the kind of issues in the industry is like, how do you kind of have people zoom out and have a bigger picture of what's going on in the area? Because we don't want to just be viewing those showings or things as like little discrete things. You want to understand the larger system, because that increases the likelihood that you're going to eventually find a really large deposit, right? Which we need. Like, the world needs collectively some large discoveries to have more metal in the pipeline. Is that still part of why this approach is what you all use?
Yeah, absolutely. And it very much encourages you to start at that really big scale. So it's to ask that question: is this really the belt I even want to be in?
Mm-hmm.
As Sam said, you've got an outcrop or a showing, and you've got some geological observations. So you build a hypothesis around it, and then you can really pull out and say, okay, we think this is. Let's use the example of a greenstone belt. We're chasing komatiite hosted nickel. We've got a showing that indicates that might be what's going on, but if we zoom out and we look at the geological history, the tectonic evolution, do we have justification for this interpretation? And it also allows you to pivot in what you're looking for, because you may have this hypothesis that says, okay, this is komatiite hosted nickel, but you may work through some of these key mineral system processes and say, actually, do you know what? This isn't a greenstone belt. This is maybe a subduction, collisional associated magmatism event.
Mm.
And you're still going to have mafic, ultramafic rocks. You still might have nickel, but how you explore for that is going to change.
Mm.
And so it is giving you that frame and lens to look at things from the fundamentals onwards.
Oh, that's really interesting. And Sam, how have you? Maybe if you could talk a little bit about your experience in general with exploration. And I mean, the thing that I find interesting about this is I wonder if it leads to a higher likelihood that people will actually say, this isn't what we thought, so we're going to do something different.
Yeah.
Right? Which, when I hear companies pitch all the time, especially in the junior space, like, to raise money, because that's usually what you're doing if you're a junior nonstop, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
you have to appear extremely certain of what you think is
Mm-hmm.
going on. So there's not as much to say, look, we don't really know why this is here, right? And we're going to go figure it out.
It gives you freedom of thought to a certain degree. And again, it's a testable thing, right? You can have an idea and you can test it. And I mean, another part of it too is that if you have a testable idea or you create a mineral systems framework for a region, well, at the same time, you can also create a contrarian one saying, well, if this isn't the source for this region, then what would it look like? And what would that mean? And maybe it means you have a different perspective region, or maybe it means nothing. Maybe it was just a dead basin if you're looking for a rift basin. So it gives you things to test, as well as going into it, you can know what you expect. And if you don't find it, you can already have a plan in place on what you might expect otherwise. And you can know those things, the observations that you'll make, where if you see that, okay, well, maybe we have to back away from this. It wasn't what we thought it was, or it was, and we're just going to take it in another direction.
And on that, so how was your experience in the Xplor program? What kind of evolution of your thinking or your approach did you see coming through, an accelerator, which is
Yeah.
not kind of typical in the mining space?
No, not at all. I think it's safe to say the Xplor program was the first accelerator in the mining space. Our experience with it is, well, to a certain degree, Bronzite wouldn't exist without Xplor. I wouldn't be here. I think it's safe to say, and Libby can correct me if I'm wrong, that Bronzite was the Xplor program's first success, because my first day started on the first day of the Xplor program. So because of Xplor, Bronzite doubled in size as a corporation. We got a name and a logo, which otherwise, without Xplor, we would have just been a numbered company. But my experience and Bronzite's experience in Xplor has just been phenomenal. As I mentioned, a large part of the reason why we're here and we're able to run our exploration program is because of the Xplor program. And I mean, Xplor itself is a fantastic team of people. Libby, all the other people who have worked, well, for our 6 months in the Xplor program, worked tirelessly and probably an uncountable number of hours trying to ensure our success and our professional and personal growth as individuals in the program, as well as our company as a whole. I mean, I think it's safe to say that Xplor really wants all the companies in the cohort to succeed. It goes without saying, and it shows with the amount of time and effort they put into all of us. So we were really proud to be a part of the program. We were very excited to be a part of the Xplor program. I mean, for us, there's such a long list of things that Xplor has done for us. I mean, it's turned our going back, to the mineral systems thing. Well, we had an idea, which turned into a testable hypothesis, and now we have potentially an investable project. And that's thanks to Xplor. We're a company with a corporate structure instead of just being a holding company for some claims. So our experience with Xplor has been fantastic.
So, Libby, could you take a step back and maybe explain also a little bit about what is an accelerator in the context of mining and exploration? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, and it's a good question, and it's one that I had when I joined the Xplor team. Was okay, what's this accelerator thing that we're going to be doing? And it comes out of places like Silicon Valley, and there are a couple of key features which are common to all accelerators. One of which is they provide funding. So in the case of Xplor, it's $500,000 as a grant. And then it also provides different types of coaching, mentoring, access to experts, access to master classes, the opportunity to develop skill sets and tools that maybe you wouldn't have seen before or haven't thought about in that way. So that's what's common to all accelerators.
Mm-hmm.
And with Xplor, we took that into things like business and technical coaching. Sam and I had a conversation every 2 weeks where we went through the work that he was doing and discussed things from a technical and an operational perspective. And I, gave suggestions around things to consider, put Bronzite in touch with various experts that we had internally and externally. And then the sort of masterclass component around a lot of knowledge sharing, we did actually have members of the cohort gave masterclasses. What actually happened that was really amazing was the cohort themselves have shared knowledge amongst themselves without our encouragement as well. So there's been this sort of organic knowledge sharing that's happened, which has been really exciting. And the reason we wanted to look at things as an accelerator was, it's kind of a funny way to think about it, but what we actually think Xplor does is provides the opportunity to slow down so that you can then speed up.
Mm-hmm.
So in that 6-month period, being able to think about your concept in a different way, like Sam said, put it into a framework that makes it this investable concept and business, and then know what the key questions you need to answer from a geological perspective. What's the key work you need to do from an above ground perspective? All of these things that build up to then a successful next big step out of the program.
And Sam, what did you see being one of the guinea pigs, right? Being one of the first groups to go through this for the first time, like, what did you come out of it thinking needs to be adopted or changed in the industry at large? Because I think that's kind of what's really neat to think about is like, what did you say? Hey, yeah, like having gone through this different process, like this is part of why the industry isn't doing X, Y, or Z. Like we need something different in how we're approaching it.
Sure. That one's actually pretty easy because one of the first things that and I think all the other companies in the cohort, in the first Xplor cohort, realized very soon on was that even though we're competitors, I mean, because ultimately the 7 companies are competitors, but that didn't stop us from sharing information with each other, giving each other ideas. There was this degree of openness that Xplor fostered, which is not very common in the juniors industry, but it's extremely helpful. So having that degree of openness where you can still keep trade secrets to yourself, but be willing to discuss things with people who maybe are looking for a similar commodity, but in a completely different part of the world, in a different belt. And you can share information that'll advance both of your companies and your projects, um, without having to feel like you have to hold on everything that you know is yours and nobody else's, because there's no way we're going to discover the next big ore deposit if everybody's holding on to every little piece of information that they've gathered throughout their entire career, their experience. So just that openness, I think, is needed, um, while being cognizant of the fact that we are competitors, but that doesn't mean we can't talk to one another in an open forum. I mean, another thing for us is that juniors shouldn't be afraid of coming to major with an idea, and having the fear that a major is just going to scoop it away from them, because the Xplor program showed that's not the case at all. BHP, specifically, because we're talking about Xplor, has been very open about accommodating people's projects, working together. There's no fear of being scooped out from underneath. So this idea that majors are these big, scary major mining companies, and we're just lowly juniors, if we still want to use the term junior, because I mean that also implies in and of itself that we're inexperienced, which most juniors aren't. Some of the most experienced and capable explorers and geologists in the world run junior mining companies. We should just call ourselves explorers, I think.
That's a great point. Why do we call them juniors?
That's a good point.
I don't even know where that came from. Do you guys know?
I don't know myself, but I know.
No, I'm not aware of where it came from, and it is a funny one because it was one when I joined the team coming in as the Explore technical lead, explaining the sort of setup of juniors, mid tiers, majors, service providers, consultants, all of this ecosystem that we have around the mining and mineral exploration industry. But yeah, you're right, not really knowing where those terms come from. But I think Sam's hit a really good point, and it is behind the ethos of the Explore team as well, is that we're not different, we're not better, we're not more knowledgeable than any of the cohort that we interact with or anybody within or outside of the business that we engage with. We're all explorers. We're all on that treasure hunt to find
Mm-hmm.
the next thing. And as the point was made, it's the success of major mineral discoveries is so important for where we're going as a planet,
Mm-hmm.
that we should be pulling in the same direction.
Yeah, and I mean it is. It's a weird because like oil and gas doesn't have the same kind of structure, right, that we do in mining. Where you do, I always explain it to folks that are new. It's like, yeah, I mean, you expect to be like the big fish eating the small fish, right? It's kind of how the business is perceived to work, or I think most of the time still works. And it is that way for a variety of reasons, but it doesn't have to continue to be that way, right? I mean, the conditions can change, and therefore the models and structures can change.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I like that though. I'm going to start calling everybody explorers instead of juniors. I think that's a great shift. Yeah,
An exploration company.
yeah.
That's what Bronzite, we refer to ourselves as an early exploration company.
So, Libby, if you could wave your magic wand and change one thing about the industry, maybe it's something you thought of through this explore process, or maybe it's just something in general that you wish we could change or people understood better about the industry, what would it be?
Something for me, and that's such a wonderful idea, and especially for me, I'm quite passionate about the industry, how it's perceived, how we can bring a next generation of geoscientists into exploration. Um, it's actually something that we're really a long way ahead of, and I wish the public would understand how much the industry has changed.
Mm.
How progressive a lot of exploration companies are around community engagement, social license to operate, environmental considerations, free, prior, and informed consent. All of these really key things that when you're going out into these areas will help support the chances that you can keep doing what you want to be doing. And really the shift in the industry, even in the 20 years that I've been in it, has been astonishing, and I don't think that's necessarily understood. And then the other key piece for me, and this was what was really wonderful about the cohort and about the program, was how open and trusting everybody was. And Sam touched on it, that we did try to foster this environment of collaboration. We did kick off with some points around respectful discussion, psychologically safe workplaces, how to engage with everybody in the room in a respectful way. And I think that's something I would like to see carried back out into the industry more. If we want to attract the great minds and the amazing ideas that are going to keep exploration driving forward and having success, we need to welcome everybody to the table and make them feel like they want to stay. So I think those are two key pieces for me.
Yeah, no, awesome. How about you, Sam?
Well, I think one really big thing is, well, one thing that the Explore program provided through its access to experts and things like that is this framing ESG related issues as a non technical risk related to project development. So we have our technical risks. Is there actually an ore deposit there? How big is it? Which will drive investability of projects. But then there's another risk involved, which usually isn't considered directly as a risk or framed as a risk, but it's the non technical risk. Do we have proactive community engagement? Is there free, prior, and informed consent? Like Libby said, are we acting as environmental stewards to the land as we're exploring there? And then if it goes to the next stage, as we're developing there as well. So seeing the industry think about things on the ESG side as a non-technical risk and framing things in that mindset is this will, one, it'll directly affect the investability of a project if there's a large non-technical risk, even if you have a great copper deposit, let's say, but does the community around not want you to be there? Have you not done your due diligence? So there is a shift right now, I think, for companies and people in the industry being more progressive, thinking about things, considering ESG issues a lot more than they would have 25 years ago. I think that goes without saying. But continuing on that path and hitting it hard, because we do need to change the perception of mining in the public side, because we are thought of as the big bad mining companies, but we're not. And we do genuinely take these issues seriously and with the utmost consideration. And so driving that and trying to show the public that no, there has been a change over the past decade, even just the past decade, not 2 decades. I mean, I think the change is going exponential, the rate of the change. But so just continuing on that path of one, changing the public perception, showing that we do care about these issues, and continuing to focus really on the ESG space. And we want to be welcomed into the areas we're exploring. We don't want to explore there in despite the local community's opposition. We can say we want them to welcome us, and we want to be able to give value back to the communities in the areas that we're working, in whatever way communities define it, right? We can't tell them what they want. We should be listening and hearing what they want and then giving that back to them to the best of our ability. So I think that's a big change. And that's one thing I'm looking forward to seeing in the future is a shift. Well, I shouldn't say a shift because that implies that there hasn't been one already, but continuing on this path, changing the public perception for the better of mining companies and taking ESG issues very seriously.
But I wonder if there's a connection there between Libby, your thoughts on taking that kind of different culture, that working culture collaboration, and kind of how you framed wanting to bring that out into the industry. Well, then also bringing that into communities as well, right? How do you take that kind of again, like we're partners here, right? Even from a very early stage. I think that when people talk about changing the perception of the industry, I always point out, like, if we want people to perceive us as different, then we have to actually do things differently, right? Like, it's not just a PR issue. Like, we actually have to do the stuff that will make people
Yeah.
want us to be there doing what we do, right? Which, I mean, it sounds like duh, but a lot of times I think people are like, oh no, we just need to like communicate what we're doing differently on our website and our, and it's like, no, you have to actually change how you do things, and then they'll see you differently.
Yeah, that piece around building authentic long-term partnerships, and
Mm-hmm.
how your first steps have to have that intent.
Yeah.
And as you say, then and that's with the communities we work in, that's with the people we collaborate with, that's that's everybody. And as you say, it's the doing, not the saying, sometimes, right?
Yeah, and I think oftentimes folks don't realize, because I've worked in a lot of really kind of frontier slash emerging markets, and it's incredibly important there, right? Because you it is the explorers, it's the geos and the juniors, or it's those teams who are a community's first interaction with the industry, right? So how your explorers, how your geologists, your field teams going out doing early stage stuff, how they interact with the community and talk about what they're doing is going to completely be kind of that community's first interaction with the industry. And I think that's what a lot of times people don't understand. Like it's not like the majors or the mid tiers when they've come in. We really have to focus on at that early stage, how are you explaining what you're doing and what that means for a community, right? and
Mm-hmm.
and how are you entering in at a very, again, it's super uncertain, you really don't know what's there yet, you don't know what it means for the community. So how do you talk about that stuff? How do you frame risk in a way at a very early stage differently, so you don't create false expectations or long-term partnership issues? Because realistically also, it's probably not going to be that team that's actually building the mine and running it, right? Like 5-10 years later. So it's this weird dynamic, I think, that we haven't quite sorted out. It's all the geologist's fault, really.
um I think it's a really good point, though, and there has been research that shows that some of the most challenging times in terms of social license and free and prime informed consent, things like that, are when a project transitions through different stages of the mining cycle. So it is when it goes from early stage exploration to maybe definition drilling, and then if it goes into development, and then and those are the times where you can lose that engagement, because as you say, you switch teams, and if you've not transitioned the team that are engaged with local communities and key stakeholders, then you can lose that key narrative. I think as an industry as a whole, it's stepping up and saying, yeah, we understand that this is important. And we also, it's a challenging thing, but the idea that you may not have success in a region,
Mm-hmm.
but the legacy you leave behind you will color how other people coming to a place will be able to operate as well. We are a global industry, a global community, and our actions have big footprints. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and how can we make sure we don't jeopardize things for that next the next group that comes after us?
Yeah, I always love the Boy Scout motto: leave the campsite cleaner than you found it, right? Like, no matter, you should always
Yeah.
be aiming to leave things better off, right? In some way. Even if you're not going to be there. Like, try to leave it better than you found it.
If I could hop on that last point for a second, I think one of the things that we can do so that it's not the geos who are the first, the summer student, early outreach before it's required. In a lot of jurisdictions, there are requirements for community engagement, and the requirements usually kick in at when you're transitioning to a more advanced exploration stage, when you really require land use permits, or you're going to start drilling, that's usually when you're required to start reaching out and telling people what you're doing. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have done that outreach before. And I think it's a simple thing of that early outreach and then framing it so you're not getting people's hopes up. Let's say you don't want the community to think that, well, there's going to be a mine here, this is going to be fantastic. You go out early before anybody else has gone there, or you've even put boots on the ground. Your first boot should go right to the people in the community and explain what you're doing. Hey, we're here to learn and understand the geology of this area. We don't know what's here yet. That's what we're here for now. And over the next several years, as we return, we're going to try to increase our understanding. And at the same time, invite them on that journey with you of learning.
Yeah, because I think it goes to the earlier point we were talking about of, within the cohort, right? There are so many things that you can learn and do faster and better by including more people in that process, as opposed to keeping things super secret and quiet in the community as to what you're looking for, what you're doing, right? I think the same principle applies. There are ways to include people in that discovery process, meaning like learning of the geology and what's going on, that without putting things at risk. But sometimes I think that's why that first phase people don't communicate, as it's like, oh, I don't want anyone else to know I'm out here looking for
exactly
rocks, right? Then everyone else is going to show up, But I don't think it has to be that way. Yeah. Well, cool. Any other last closing comments on what you would change about the industry, or what you are changing? Maybe that's a better question, of what you're changing in real time.
I hope we're changing the way people think about how to do exploration. And I don't mean that in this instance, I don't mean that about the mineral system or anything like that, but I do mean that in the sort of collaborative way that we've been talking about. And I hope that some of the discussion today is made people curious about Xplor. It is, as Sam said, there is this there is a perception with some people around what large mining companies are doing and why BHP has got Xplor going on. And I hope the comments that we've made today let people put aside some of their judgments and be a little bit more curious about it, and talk to your peers, discuss where the potential is, and why BHP's doing it, thinking about why BHP's doing this, and what can be taken away from it.
Absolutely. And anything from you, Sam?
Oh, I think Libby hit the nail on the head with that one. I mean, going into Xplor, I think Xplor is changing the industry. And, if anybody here is considering applying to Xplor, do it. There's nothing to lose. Like, it'll probably be the greatest decision you ever made.
Oh, there you go. Well, on that note, awesome. Well, thank you both for joining us, and look forward to watching how everything progresses.
Thanks, Emily.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to all our listeners, as well as Libby and Sam, for joining me on this episode of On the Rocks, brought to you by the BHP Xplor program. If you'd like to learn more about the program or apply, please visit prospectorportal.com/BHP or email us at info@prospectorportal.com. Be sure to tune in next time for more great episodes from the mining industry's leading podcast.